Hey guys, tonight we gather around an ancient fire, one that's burned for tens of thousands of years, passed not by wood but by word. You sit cross-legged in the dust, the stars above hanging low like someone threw glitter onto black velvet. The wind smells like eucalyptus and smoke, and a didgeridoo rumbles softly like the earth itself is humming you to sleep. But listen closely, because these stars? They're not just pretty lights. To the oldest continuous storytellers on earth, they're books. They're calendars. They're compasses. And if you read them wrong, if you forget even a single line, well, let's just say you probably won't survive the dry season. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time down in the comments. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from under your own piece of sky. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not you anymore. Not in this story. You are a barefoot child, quiet beside the fire, knowing not to interrupt the old woman with the ochre-dusted face and the voice like cracked leather. She begins to speak, not reading, not reciting, but remembering. The stars above her shimmer, and somehow, without turning your head, you feel them shift. It's not magic. Not quite. But it is more than science, too. You live in a time before time was counted by numbers. Time moves in stories. Every story has a place. Every place has a star. And each star has a meaning, a lesson, a warning, a whisper of love or grief. And you? You're the sand beneath the sky. You're the student of memory, pulled into the deep rhythms of the dreaming. She tells you of a place in the desert where the rocks split open once a year, not because of weather, but because a celestial spirit returns, steps down from a star, and breathes life into the earth. You have to be there, she says, on the right day, under the right star. Or the spirit misses us, and the water stays locked underground. This isn't metaphor. This is literal survival. In the old ways, you don't tell stories to entertain. You tell them because the bush plums won't ripen unless the sky says they will. Because the crocodile mothers won't guard their nests if the moon's in the wrong phase. Because you might walk toward water and find fire instead. One scholarly debate still swirls about this kind of knowledge. Some anthropologists insist these stories are symbolic. Others argue they're literal, practical science disguised in poetry. But ask any Yalanga elder in Arnhem Land, and they'll blink at you like you've missed the obvious. It's all the same thing. Here's a quirk. The same stars we use to feel tiny and philosophical? They once told someone exactly where to dig for fresh water. They told someone when to plant yams, when to leave, when to mourn, when to laugh again. You know that saying about shooting stars? In some Aboriginal groups, that's a soul racing home. Better make sure your fire's lit so they can find their way back. And now you realize, you're not just a listener tonight. You're a thread in the fabric. The fire pops. The old woman's story slows, but she's not done. No one claps. No one interrupts. That would be like pausing mid-sentence during a thunderstorm. Instead, you tilt your face toward the constellations, just in time to see one wink at you. You lie back in the sand, still warm from the day's heat, and stare upward as if the sky were a canvas someone had painted stories onto in charcoal and smoke. But then something strange happens. You notice that not all the stories are drawn in stars. Some are drawn in the gaps between the stars. See that? Someone murmurs, pointing a gnarled finger just above the Southern Cross. That's the emu. You squint, but there's no cluster of lights shaped like a bird. Instead, there's a dark, fuzzy smudge running across the Milky Way, like a smear of soot or a feathered shadow. That's the emu in the sky, one of the oldest known constellations, visible not because of the stars it contains, but because of the space they leave behind. It's a pattern made of absence, and somehow that feels profound. Like remembering someone by the shape of the silence they left behind. The emu's head sits near the Coalsack Nebula, with its body stretched across the band of the Milky Way. In Western scientific terms, it's a dust cloud. In Aboriginal lore, it's a cosmic guide. When the emu is upright in the sky during April and May, that's when the real-life emus begin laying their eggs. And you don't need a calendar to go looking for them. You just need eyes and memory. Historians still argue whether Aboriginal Australians were the first people on Earth to conceptualize negative space constellations. But if you ask the elders, they won't say they invented anything. They'll say they notice. And noticing, in this world, is the highest form of wisdom. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. In some parts of the country, the emu in the sky isn't just a calendar. It's also a law enforcer. If you've taken more eggs than you should have, or worse, broken a taboo, you might find yourself with dreams full of chasing birds and clawed feet. The emu becomes the hunter, and you the hunted. Your story doesn't end in the stars either. Because the emu isn't just up there. It's down here too. Carved into rock. Painted on bark. Etched into the very ground you sleep on. In Ku-ring-gai-chase National Park near Sydney, there's a 15-meter-long engraving of the emu spirit, aligned precisely with the emu in the sky when it rises during egg season. That's not just a coincidence. That's a map. A sky-to-earth translation long before GPS. You sit up again, rubbing sand off your elbows, and it hits you. What if you'd never looked up with wonder before? What if your whole sense of direction, of morality, of memory itself, had been taught to you by a silhouette in the sky? Another child beside you whispers, "That's Gani." The emu. She says it like it's someone she knows. And she does. Because Gani is part of her world, not just her sky. And now you can't unsee it. You see the beak, the long neck, the strong belly. You see stories stretching across space not as decorations, but as destinations. The stars no longer twinkle. They speak. Maybe next time you glance up and see nothing, you'll know better. You'll know to look at what isn't there. The sand is soft beneath you, still radiating the day's heat, and now your ears begin to catch the rhythm under the silence. Not a drum, not a song, but something older, a melody that's never been sung the same way twice and yet always takes you to the same place. You're about to walk the song lines. Not with your feet, not yet, but in your mind, you're already moving. Because to the old ones, the land isn't just terrain. It's memory. It's a living storybook. And every step you take along a certain path is a syllable in a sacred verse. In this world, every rock has a verse. Every riverbank has a rhythm. Every mountain range has its own harmony. Together, they form what Western anthropologists call oral maps, but what Aboriginal Australians call simply truth. The dreaming stories, those vast ancestral tales, aren't locked away in books or tablets. They're sung into the land, and back out of it, over and over, for thousands of years. Think of them as cosmic mixtapes, passed down like family recipes but with exact timing and geographical coordinates baked in. Want to get from the desert to the coast? You don't need a compass. You need a melody. And if you mess up the tune? Well, you can end up somewhere very wet. Or very, very snake-infested. Historians still debate the accuracy of song lines as navigational tools. Some insist the lyrical directions are metaphorical. Others have followed them and ended up exactly where the songs said they would. Funny how symbolic keeps turning out to mean start walking that way. Here's the quirky bit. Sometimes the songs include non-land elements too, like a specific type of bird call you'll hear halfway through the journey, or the way your shadow falls when you reach a sacred boulder. These things aren't random. They're markers. Verse becomes vision. And the same song sung in a different region might contain alternate verses, like remix tracks, tailored to the local topography. Some elders even describe this system like Wi-Fi. You're tapping into a dreaming signal that spans the entire continent. Your guide tonight, a wiry, ash-smudged elder named Jack, closes his eyes and hums. The tune rises low in his throat, then arcs like a hawk catching a thermal. You don't recognize the language, but your body does. Your chest vibrates in sympathy. Your feet twitch, like they already want to start walking. You remember a story Jack told earlier about a woman who once got lost in the bush. Everyone thought she'd perish within days, but she knew the tune of a particular dreaming track. So she followed it, sung it in soft breaths through her cracked lips. 5 days later, she walked into a campsite carrying tubers and laughing like she'd just returned from the corner store. The stars above pulse faintly. Some say they light the way for songline walkers. Others say they're the ancestors themselves, leaning down to listen, to see if you're getting the lyrics right. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe the answer is in the fourth verse, the one you haven't learned yet. And now, as Jack's song fades, you feel something shift under your bones. Like the earth is a drum, and you've just been invited to tap along. Don't worry. You'll get the melody eventually. Jack's song still lingers in your head, long after the notes fall silent. It doesn't rhyme. It doesn't loop. But somehow, it circles back around to itself, like the seasons. Like the sky. And speaking of the sky, You glance up and realize it's changing again. The emu in the sky is shifting, leaning forward. Its body, which once stretched proudly across the heavens, is now bowed. One leg starts to dip below the horizon. Jack nods toward it with a grunt. "Time to burn," he says, as if reading your thoughts. "Wait, burn? Welcome to one of the oldest forms of environmental engineering on Earth, fire stick farming." Aboriginal Australians didn't just survive the land. They curated it, maintained it, manicured it, using controlled burns guided by celestial signs. Forget what you know about wildfires. These were precise, seasonal, and deeply spiritual. You didn't just toss a match and hope for the best. You waited for the sky to invite you. And sometimes, that invitation came in the form of Orion rising just so, or the emu lowering her head like a bow of approval. Historians still argue whether Aboriginal fire practices were primarily spiritual or scientific. But that's like arguing whether water is wet or drinkable. The old ways don't separate fact from meaning. The emu dips, the grass burns. Simple. Here's the quirky part. Some groups use tree sap mixed with termite mound powder as a natural accelerant. You'd think something like that would be lost to history. But Jack still carries a pouch of it, wrapped in dried possum skin and smelling faintly of smoke and eucalyptus. You follow him across a dry plain where the grass reaches mid-calf and crunches underfoot. He points at a section of land where he burned 2 months ago. Green shoots are already rising. Kangaroo tracks dot the edges. Birds hop from tree to tree, picking at new insects. "It sings louder now," Jack says, tapping his chest. And that's the secret no textbook ever really captures. Fire isn't destruction, it's conversation. The land tells you when it's tired, when it needs to sleep. You give it fire, and in return, it gives you food, shelter, life. But only if you've paid attention. Only if you've remembered the sky. That's the thing, none of this works without the stars. The emu tells you when. Orion tells you how. Venus? Venus is your clock. When she rises low and flickers red, it's a warning. Too dry. Too late. Too risky. Burn then, and you might invite a real wildfire. Burn earlier, and you just waste the spark. But get it right, and you've made a feast trail. A sanctuary. A lifeline. You crouch beside a still smoking patch and watch a spider flee into the underbrush. Jack drops a smoldering stick beside you, the smoke curling upward like it's searching for a star to kiss. Funny thing, modern scientists only began validating the ecological wisdom of this practice in the past couple decades. Meanwhile, the stories have been here for tens of thousands of years, sitting in the open, waiting for someone to stop arguing and start listening. The fire crackles. The stars blink. The emu turns her back. The land is ready to sleep again. You sleep with the scent of ash in your hair, dreaming of stars. And when you wake, it's still dark. But not black dark, sky dark. That specific shade of indigo only seen when the fire has burned low and the cosmos stretched wide above you, winking like they've been watching the whole time. Then, out of the quiet, a girl's voice beside you asks, "Do you see the sisters running?" You follow her pointing finger upward. There, clustered near Orion, is a tight little group of stars, flickering, soft, like a handful of seeds tossed into the sky. The Pleiades. In Western astronomy, they're called the Seven Sisters. In Aboriginal storytelling, same name, same vibe, but with a far older origin. You learn quickly that nearly every Aboriginal group has a version of the Seven Sisters tale, and most are strikingly similar. The sisters are celestial women, clever and beautiful, fleeing an aggressive male figure, often represented by the star Orion or one of its bright neighbors. He pursues them across the sky, endlessly, tirelessly, and never, ever catches them. Historians still argue whether this recurring myth proves ancient cross-continental storytelling or simply a shared human instinct to find drama in the stars. But honestly, you're too caught up in the chase to care. One version goes like this. The sisters were spirit women, caretakers of sacred knowledge. But one of them broke a law by dancing too close to the men's ceremonial grounds. As punishment, they were exiled to the sky, where they now run eternally from a lecherous hunter who stalks the night. Another version says the sisters stole fire, and Orion is trying to reclaim it. Yet another claims the sisters are fire, sparks flung into space during the Great Creation. There's a delicious quirk here, though. In many of these stories, one sister is missing. You look up, Count them. 1, 2, 3, maybe 6? Sometimes you see 7. Sometimes you don't. And the stories match that. One hides. The girl beside you says simply, "She was taken once. She doesn't want to be seen again." This myth isn't just Aboriginal either. Cultures all over the world, including the Greeks, Japanese, and Maori, have similar tales about fleeing sisters and persistent pursuers. Some researchers suggest that this is because the Pleiades were once brighter. Thousands of years ago, the missing star may have been visible to the naked eye. But it's faded, like a whisper too quiet to catch. And yet, every culture remembers her. What does it say about people who can carry a story through the erosion of time, past colonization, and down through countless generations, all while the very sky shifts above them? You lie there and imagine being the sister who hides. The one the world forgot. But not entirely. She's still there, tucked behind the others, her name whispered at firesides by children who've never used a telescope. That's memory. That's endurance. That's resistance. And now, you realize the girl has stopped pointing. She's humming something, soft, circular, echoing the rhythms of the stars above. It's not a lullaby. It's a warning. A lament. A map. In the story, the sisters never stop running. But down here, beneath them, people keep telling their tale over and over, so it never fades like the lost star. So maybe the sisters win after all. You blink, and it's suddenly daylight. The stars are gone, or at least, invisible now. But the stories aren't. Because they're not just written in the sky. They're carved into bark, painted with ochre, and brushed onto rock faces in spirals and strokes that look suspiciously like galaxies. You step into a clearing where a great slab of bark leans against a gum tree, curling at the edges like a scroll unfurling itself just for you. It's painted in vivid, earthy tones, red from ochre, white from clay, black from charcoal, and a deep yellow from crushed flowers. Swirls overlap lines that crosshatch waves, which ripple out from a central spiral. At first glance, it's just a pattern. Abstract. Beautiful. But then Jack appears again, chewing something that smells like pepper and eucalyptus. He taps a long finger at the center. "That's us," he says. "The mob. The middle. The fire." Then he circles the edge with his hand. "That's the Milky Way." And the song travels from one to the other. You stare harder. Sure enough, the shape resembles a barred spiral galaxy. But how? How could someone without telescopes, satellites, or even written language have rendered something that accurate? Historians still argue whether such bark paintings are meant to represent literal celestial bodies or symbolic forces. But there it is, a shape uncannily close to what Hubble captured only a few decades ago, painted by someone's grandfather's grandfather's grandfather before the first British boat ever scraped Australia's shore. Here's a quirky bit: bark paintings weren't always meant to last. In fact, most were created for ceremony and then allowed to decay. The painting's power wasn't in its permanence. It was in the act of remembering it, recreating it, and retelling the story every time. You watch as another elder dips a twig into ochre and touches up a chipped section. No reverence, no white gloves, just maintenance. Like refreshing a bookmark in a cosmic library. And suddenly it hits you. The sky above may be vast, but it's also fragile. You don't own it. You tend to it. Like a fire. Like a garden. Like a painting that could disappear unless someone remembers where each line goes. You crouch beside the bark. The spiral seems to pulse as the sunlight hits it just so. You ask Jack, "Is that really the galaxy?" He shrugs. Maybe. Maybe it's just a goanna track. But then he grins, because he knows what you're really asking. And he knows the answer doesn't fit neatly into a single sentence. Maybe it's both. Maybe the point isn't what it is, but that it is. That someone noticed. That someone sang it, painted it, passed it on, long before you were born, long before your ancestors were even thinking about mapping the sky. You trail your fingers across the bark. The ochre rubs off, faintly, just enough to sting your fingertips. Now you carry a bit of it too. The heat of the day rises and falls like breath. You wander back toward the camp, but no one seems in a rush. There are no clocks here, no wristwatches, no alarms. And yet, everyone knows exactly what time it is. Because time isn't measured by minutes. It's measured by frogs. You think you misheard that at first, but Jack just chuckles when you look confused. The green tree frogs started singing last night, Eh? That means we're near the second wet moon. You have so many questions. What's a wet moon? What do frogs have to do with it? But none of the answers come in a straight line. They come the same way everything else does here, layered in observation, told through behavior, and wrapped in story. Aboriginal Australians didn't use months and weeks the way modern calendars do. Instead, they read the world through ecological cues. When the frogs sang, when the ghost gums shed bark, when certain flowers bloomed, when beetles changed their wing color, each of these was a sign, a page in the bush calendar. And if you're paying attention, you can almost hear it turning. The night sky had shown the emu dipping low last week, so that means egg season's ending. But now, the nights are thick with humidity. Clouds stack like lazy pancakes on the horizon. The frogs are out, which means soon, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, the first heavy rains will come. Historians still argue whether these seasonal calendars were formalized systems or instinctive ones. But here's a fun twist. Many communities map them explicitly. Some calendars use 5 seasons. Others use 6. A few use 13. It all depended on where you lived and how closely you listened. And you can't fake your way through these signs. Jack once told you about a city scientist who tried to predict bush plum season using charts. Got it wrong 3 years in a row. Meanwhile, an elder watched a certain ant walk in a particular pattern one afternoon and said, "They'll ripen in 6 days." Nailed it. Here's a quirky detail. In some places, people use the sound of raindrops on particular leaves to predict how long this storm would last. One type of tree meant a quick sprinkle. Another? A long drenching. Not because of magic. Because they listened for 1,000 years. You walk past a eucalyptus tree now and hear a gentle plop, plop from somewhere in its branches. Jack hears it too and grins, already reaching to move the firewood under cover. There's no rush. Everything unfolds when it should. And now you feel it, that subtle synchronization. Your heartbeat slows. Your thoughts quiet. You stop trying to measure the moment and start simply being in it. The wind nudges the leaves. A lizard flicks its tail. A single frog calls out again, echoing across the still air. You don't know his name, but you do know his message. Time is turning. By the time the sun dips low again, the sky has turned that syrupy gold that makes everything look older, ancient, even. You walk toward a ridge where a storm is grumbling in the distance, a slow rolling baseline that shakes the air before the rain even arrives. You squint. Lightning forks in the far distance. But Jack isn't looking at the clouds. He's holding something small, delicate, and gleaming, a fishhook made of bone. You know where this came from? He asks, dangling it between 2 fingers. You assume the answer will be a river. A lake, maybe. But Jack points up, straight at the gathering storm. In some dreaming stories, lightning isn't just weather. It's a spirit. A fisher. The bolts you see? They're spears being thrown. Hooks being cast. Storms are hunt scenes, battles, ceremonies in the sky. You just have to learn how to read them. He places the bone fishhook in your hand. It's tiny. Sharp. Carved from the jaw of some ancient animal. They used these in the mangroves near Yalangara, he says. But the story? That starts up there. And again, he points to the heavens. Aboriginal storytellers tracked lightning patterns with astonishing accuracy. Certain regions knew that lightning bolts always struck specific trees first, likely due to iron deposits, though they explained it as ancestral conductors. Spirit guides. Celestial totem poles. Historians still argue whether such lore evolved from repeated observation or divine inspiration. But the results don't lie. People knew when to move camps, when to seek shelter, and when to prepare for the gift of flooded rivers, full of fish and turtles. Here's a quirky one. Some groups believed lightning was attracted to lies. If someone broke a sacred law or withheld the truth, the storm would find them. Lightning wasn't random. It was justice. You look back at the storm. One bolt crashes, dazzling the sky. It forks into 3. Jack hums softly. Then he gestures you to crouch and help gather a few stone tools left nearby, axes, scrapers, and a small basin carved into a flat rock. Lightning's going to break something tonight, he says matter-of-factly. Could be a tree. Could be a story. You pause. A story? He nods. Some get broken if no one listens anymore. Storms shake loose the forgotten ones. You glance at the bone hook again. It's still warm from his hand, or maybe from the memory it carries. This isn't just a tool, It's a recording device. A physical syllable in a tale too long for any one person to hold in their head alone. That's why the objects matter. The hook, the stone, the burn mark on the tree, they're all fragments. Anchors for the bigger picture. Together, they say, we were here. We knew this. We remembered. Another flash. This one closer. You and Jack both look up, squinting through the first fat drops of rain. Let's get under, he mutters, tucking the hook back into a pouch. The old fishers had enough patience for one night. You run together as the rain starts to pour, but even then, you half expect to see the sky reel in its catch. The rain drums lightly on the canopy, and underneath, everything smells new. Wet bark, damp earth, the tang of leaves bruised by falling water. It's the kind of freshness that feels like a blessing. You and Jack sit in the open mouth of a rock shelter, watching the storm slink away, grumbling as it goes. The fire is a smoky whisper now, steam curling from soaked logs. Jack takes a deep breath, pats the sandstone beside you, and says, "This is where you changed." You look down at the flat rock. Nothing special at first, just dirt and lichen. But then your eyes adjust. The subtle ridges, the faint grooves, there's a carving. A man. Or what used to be one. In the story, there was a stubborn old man, full of pride, full of noise. He wouldn't stop talking. Not even when the sky warned him. Not even when the trees felt quiet. The ancestors grew tired. They gave him a chance to listen, and when he didn't, they turned him into a tree. And there he still stands. Somewhere near here, an actual tree grows, twisted in a way no others do, its bark spiraled like a fingerprint. No one cuts it. No one climbs it. Because to the people of this place, that tree is a person. A warning. A reminder. Historians still argue whether these transformation stories were metaphorical moral tales or rooted in memory, maybe even in ancient encounters with unexplained illness, sudden death, or natural disasters. But here's what's real, everyone in the community still walks wide around that tree. Here's a strange detail for you, certain termite mounds near the tree are shaped like faces. Big-nosed, hollow-eyed, sunken-cheeked. Coincidence? Maybe. But you hear a kid whisper, that's where his words leak out. Chilling. And weirdly beautiful. Jack places his palm flat on the rock surface, over the carving's heart. His story still holds heat, he murmurs. You try it, too. The stone's been kissed by rain, but underneath, it's warm. Or maybe your hand's just warmer. Hard to tell. Doesn't matter. The important thing is the story. You see now how memory works out here. It's not locked away in books or museums. It lives in trees, in termite mounds, in weather patterns and rock faces. It's everywhere and nowhere. And if you don't know how to look, you'll walk right past it. Worse, you'll build a shopping center on it. You ask Jack, what happens if the tree falls one day? He shrugs. Then he walks again. And somehow, you believe him. The story isn't meant to comfort. It's meant to stay. In your bones. In your dreams. It's sticky, like sap. It clings. Because in this place, forgetting isn't just disrespect. It's danger. So you sit with it. You press your palm a little harder. You watch the rain clouds drift apart, letting stars blink back into place. And maybe, just maybe, the tree watches too. The stars come out slow, one at a time, like shy children peeking around doorframes. You sit on the still damp earth beside Jack, the fire rekindled into a low crackle, casting shadows that wobble across the bark of nearby trees. It's quiet, until a glint streaks across the sky. You jolt slightly, pointing. Shooting star! Jack doesn't even look up. Nah. That's just old Uncle Barry heading home. You think he's joking. He is. But only half. In many Aboriginal communities, meteors and satellites aren't just things in the sky. They're travelers. Spirits on the move. Messages in motion. And just because they're moving through space doesn't mean they don't have business with you down here. Take satellites. Big metal jump keeps to most people. But Jack? Jack calls the bright ones wandering eyes. He says they confuse the young ones, blur the old stories. They move wrong. Too fast. Too regular. They look like stars, but they don't speak, he mutters, jabbing a stick into the dirt. You watch another streak cut across the night. This one's slower, steady. Probably the International Space Station. You wonder what the astronauts up there would think, floating above stories they've never heard, under constellations that hold different names and rules. Historians still argue whether Aboriginal astronomy has room for the modern sky, whether ancient stories can adapt to satellites and space debris. But Jack has already made up his mind. They've got to learn to fit in. The sky's full now. And here's the twist, many Aboriginal communities have updated the stories. They fold satellites into the fabric. Some even assign them roles. New watchers, curious outsiders, or mischievous newcomers trying to find their place in the dreaming. Here's a quirky example. One elder told a tale of a silver eel that moved perfectly in straight lines, didn't flash, and only appeared after white fellas brought metal birds. He said it was looking for its dreaming and hadn't found it yet. The eel? Almost certainly a low-orbit satellite. But to him, it wasn't just a thing. It was loss. And that made it sacred. You lie back and stare upward again. The Milky Way cuts a hazy white path overhead, like a spilled bag of flour. Between the constellations you now recognize, the emu, the sisters, you also notice gaps. Places where light used to be. Stars that flickered once and don't anymore. Jack notices you noticing. You can't unsee the sky, now, he says with a smile. That's the trouble with learning. Makes you responsible. The fire pops. The satellites glide on, silent and steady. And up there, somewhere, a metal box full of scientists floats over a continent wrapped in 100,000 years of stories, many of which have never been written down, only sung, only watched, only walked. But you know one now. Just one. And that's enough to feel the weight of all the others. You're still lying there, staring upward, when the moon rises. Not gently. Not like in storybooks. No. This moon heaves its way into the sky, swollen and golden and slightly smug about how important it's about to become. Because tonight, you're going to hear how the moon stole fire. Jack throws another log onto the fire, and sparks leap upward like startled spirits. He leans back, cracking his neck, and begins. Before we had fire, he says, we only had the cold. And the moon, he liked it that way. Thought the dark made people quiet. Easier to listen to him. But then some clever woman, some say a dingo, some say a bat, tricked him. You lean closer. Already hooked. She climbed up there, he says, nodding at the moon, snuck into his cave, and stole the fire stick from where he kept it hidden in his ribs. She brought it down to the people. Gave them fire. Gave them warmth, cooking, light, noise. The moon got jealous. And angry. And he's been chasing his fire ever since. You glance at the glowing orb. Its face seems less serene now. A little more sulky. Some say that's why the moon waxes and wanes. He's sick with grief, swelling and shrinking like lungs around a sob. Others say his phases are his attempts to hide his shame. The full moon is him forgetting. The new moon is him remembering. Historians still argue whether Aboriginal fire origin myths were symbolic or encoded histories of the actual mastery of fire by ancient humans. But honestly, who cares? Whether it's allegory or anthropology, it still holds truth. Fire changed everything. And someone, somewhere, had to be brave enough to steal it. Here's a quirky angle. In one version, the fire wasn't stolen, it was accidentally dropped. The moon man slipped, and the fire tumbled down like a comet. It hit a tree, the tree caught flame, and the people figured out what to do from there. In that telling, the moon's not cruel. Just clumsy. The universe's biggest butterfingers. You ask Jack which story is the real one. He snorts. All of them. None of them. Pick the one that suits you. Just don't forget who gave you the fire. The flames crackle as if in response. You reach forward and hold your hands near the warmth. The logs glow red, echoing the fire stick from the tail. And it strikes you, this is what stories do. They aren't just for telling. They're for keeping. Like fire. Like warmth. Like warnings dressed up in wonder. You sit there long after the story ends, staring at the moon. It's so bright it casts shadows. It blurs out the weaker stars. But even then, you wonder what it's hiding behind that light. And if somewhere in its cold belly, there's still a little scorch mark. A spot where the fire once lived. The fire is now just a slow red eye in the sand. You nestle deeper into your blanket, cheek pressed to the earth, half expecting the moon to whisper something back down to you. Instead, the trees rustle once, then still. The night deepens. You're not cold. But suddenly, you feel watched. Not in a horror movie way. Not like something's going to jump out of the dark. More like the land itself is holding its breath, waiting. You glance around, then up, and there, coiled in the Milky Way, winding through stars like a thread pulled taut across the night sky, you see it. The rainbow serpent. It's not a neat image. Not some cartoon snake twirling through the constellations. It's a pattern. A suggestion. A ripple of light and curve that you now realize has been watching you all along. The rainbow serpent is one of the most widespread and revered beings in Aboriginal cosmology. It created rivers, carved valleys, formed mountain ranges by slithering through the land in the dreaming. Some say it lives in watering holes. Others say it sleeps beneath rocks or billabongs, only waking during storms. And tonight, you swear it's watching from above. Historians still debate whether the rainbow serpent myth predates the Ice Age or developed regionally in response to monsoon cycles. Either way, the stories are everywhere and the messages are consistent: creation, destruction, power, fertility, and sometimes, punishment. Here's a curious detail: in some desert communities, the rainbow serpent is genderless. It shifts between male and female depending on the story, depending on what's needed. It's flexible, like water, or lightning, or memory. Jack once told you of a boy who spat near a dry creek bed. Didn't think anything of it. Days later, he developed a rash no one could explain. The elders said the rainbow serpent was disturbed, offended by the boy's disrespect. You have to speak soft around water, Jack warned. Even when there's none to see. Especially then. You get it now. Because the serpent isn't just in the water. The serpent is the water. And in a land like this, where rivers vanish for years and then rage back without warning, water is not a passive thing. It's a creature. Alive. With memory. Tonight, the stars shimmer just enough to outline the serpent's path. Its head rests near the Southern Cross, its body curves through the Milky Way, and its tail disappears into the black. Some say it's sleeping. Some say it's still moving, slowly, so slowly we mistake it for stillness. You wonder, if it woke, what would change? Would it flood a valley? Crack open a canyon? Or simply shift the stories, nudge them into a new shape? Because that's the thing about the rainbow serpent, it doesn't just exist in stories. It's the mechanism by which stories adapt, flow, evolve. You lie back again, trying to trace its path through the sky. You get as far as the second bend in its belly before your eyelids start to droop. The serpent doesn't mind. It's patient. It's been here since before the first fire, before the stars even had names. And it remembers everything. You wake before dawn to the sound of wind teasing the treetops. Not loud, not angry, just suggestive. Like it's telling a joke only the grass understands. You sit up slowly, joints stiff from sleeping on packed earth, and glance at the sky, just in time to see the stars fading. One by one, the constellations blink out. Not all at once. Like old friends politely excusing themselves from a party. And yet, their job isn't over. Because the stars didn't just tell stories. They told time. You stretch and walk to a small rise where you can see the full horizon. It's quiet here. Too quiet to be random. Jack joins you with a cup of warm tea in hand, sips at once, then points up. There, he mutters. See the 3 stars in a row? That's the hunter's belt. When it tilts just right, we start hunting flying fox. You squint. Yep, there's Orion again, though Jack never calls him that. To him, the name changes depending on the season. Sometimes it's a hunter, sometimes it's 3 sisters crossing a river. Sometimes it's the spine of a giant goanna. In the old calendars, stars were clocks, calendars, and checklists all rolled into one. When Sirius rose just before sunrise, it was time to harvest yams. When Scorpius crawled across the zenith, it was time to leave flood-prone areas and move inland. The night sky wasn't a passive background, it was an active tool. You had to know which star did what, when it moved, and where it was pointing. Historians still argue whether these seasonal star calendars were memorized individually or passed collectively in ceremony. But the accuracy? Undeniable. Some communities could predict animal migrations with uncanny precision. They didn't guess. They watched the sky like accountants watch ledgers. Here's a strange detail. Some stories describe the stars listening just as much as they guide. One old tale tells of a man who cursed the stars out of frustration when his hunt failed. The next day, the kangaroo tracks disappeared, and his firewood went missing. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the stars simply don't take sass. Jack finishes his tea and begins drawing in the dirt with a stick. Arrows, circles, dots. It looks like a child's scribble at first, but then you see the pattern, a horizon map. One line for sunrise, another for the star's rising angle, another for the moon's shape during a specific week. It's a star calendar, drawn without ink or paper. Just memory and morning dust. You forget the stars, Jack says softly, you forget how to live here. The sun begins to rise. You blink. The final stars vanish in its glow, like stories that must wait for the next reader to come along. But you remember now. The belt, the tilt, the timing. And for the first time, you see time not as something ticking away, but as something glowing in arcs above you, reliable, steady, and humming with ancient intent. The sun climbs higher, and you move back toward camp, where smoke from the rekindled fire curls upward like a lazy question mark. A woman sits nearby, weaving something from grass and thread, her fingers moving with the kind of practiced ease that makes you feel clumsy just watching. A boy sits cross-legged beside her, eyes wide. He's not just watching her hands, he's listening to her mouth. Because this isn't just weaving, it's storytelling. You ease closer. The woman's voice is low and gravelly, shaped by years of smoke, sun, and maybe a little tobacco. She doesn't tell her story in one go. It comes in pieces, short lines, followed by silence. The boy absorbs each phrase like it's water and he's dust. The tale is about a giant echidna who stole all the fire sticks and hid them under a mountain. The people grew cold. Food rotted. Darkness ruled. So a clever crow tricked the echidna by pretending to be his shadow, and snatched the fire back just as the sun returned. The boy giggles at the echidna's grumpy voice. Then he repeats a line back to her, testing his memory. She nods once, keeps weaving. The lesson continues. You realize something quietly profound. This is how knowledge survives here. Through voices. Through teeth and tongues. Through jokes and gestures. There are no schools. No PowerPoints. Just elders and stories and a rhythm you learn not by reading, but by being around long enough. Historians still argue whether oral tradition can carry complex, multi-generational truths without distortion. But they've clearly never sat by a woman like this. Her voice doesn't crack. Her words don't drift. The facts may have changed shape over the centuries, but the core remains, hard, sharp, impossible to fake. Here's a quirky twist. The baskets she weaves aren't just storage tools. They're memory holders. Some patterns are symbolic, each strand a cue for part of a story. When you touch the basket later, your fingers follow the spiral, and the tale unspools again in your head. You ask Jack once if he's ever forgotten a story. He laughs. Course I have. But then I go sit with someone who hasn't. That's the system. Distributed memory. Everyone carries a piece. No one carries it all. That way, no one elder can be lost without the story continuing. It's the ultimate backup drive, made of people, not plastic. You watch the boy as he recites another line, this time with confidence. The woman grunts approval. Doesn't praise him. Doesn't clap. That would break the rhythm. Instead, she hands him a reed to add to the basket. Now he's part of it, threaded in. Just like you. And when she finally pauses to sip tea, you realize she hasn't told just one story. She's told 4. You missed the transitions. Didn't even notice the switch from echidnas to wallabies to floodwaters to constellations. Because the stories, like the land, don't have edges. They bleed into each other, fold like baskets, spiral like stars. And all you have to do is listen. The afternoon heat creeps in like a heavy blanket, soft and pressing. Even the flies buzz slower now, circling lazily, as if respecting the lull. You retreat with Jack to the shade of a rock outcrop, where the stone has stored just enough of last night's coolness to matter. Jack takes off his hat, wipes his forehead, and says, "You ever seen the sun disappear in the middle of the day?" You raise an eyebrow. "You mean like an eclipse?" He grins. "Nah. I mean when the sky gets nervous." You follow his gaze. He's not looking at the sky now, but at the rock wall in front of you. Faint, half-erased symbols are scrawled across it, sunbursts, moon bowls, tiny dotted trails moving like ants between them. He places a hand on the stone, right over a faded circle with black streaks running through it like tears. That, he says, is when the world blinked. In Western science, eclipses are astronomical events. Predictable. mapped centuries in advance. But here, there was something else. A warning. A moment when the spirit world poked its finger through the veil and blocked the light. The stories vary by region, but many share a similar theme. The sun is in danger. Being swallowed. Being hidden. Being punished. Some communities believed a spirit being, a sky kangaroo, or a jealous moon man, was attacking the sun. Others said the ancestors covered the sun to remind humans not to get too proud. And here's the wild part. Many Aboriginal groups knew the eclipse was coming. They weren't surprised. Some even had specific songs for it. One elder told Jack, "When the sun disappears, you don't scream. You sing. You keep it alive while it hides." Historians still argue whether these predictions were luck, pattern recognition, or evidence of long-term astronomical tracking. But let's be honest, if you can predict a solar eclipse without a telescope, you're doing something right. Want a quirky detail? Some mobs used wet clay and bark shields during eclipses, not to protect their eyes, but to protect their spirits. They believed that looking directly at the darkened sun would pull your soul out through your pupils. Think of it like spiritual sunglasses. Jack tells you a tale from his grandmother's grandmother about a man who tried to trap the sun during an eclipse to force it to stay cool forever. He succeeded, for a day. But that night, the sky got too cold, the stars screamed, and the moon fled. When the sun rose again, it scorched him into a shadow on the rock. He points at a human-shaped discoloration on the stone. Maybe it's mineral staining. Maybe it's memory. You sit there, tracing the outline with your eyes. There's something eerie about it. Not scary, just heavy. Like it knows you're looking. Then the wind shifts, and the shadow moves just enough to make you blink. Next eclipse is in 2 years, Jack says, almost casually. We'll sing when it comes. You nod, not quite ready to joke back. Because suddenly, the sky feels a little too close. And the sun, though shining bright, seems just fragile enough to blink again, if only for a moment. The wind carries a new smell, damp soil and crushed grass, and you follow it back toward camp, where a group has gathered under a shady tree. Not around a fire this time, but around a weaving circle. Laughter trickles through the leaves, and you catch snippets of teasing and story fragments tumbling over each other. In the center sits an elder woman, her fingers flying. She's weaving a basket, but not just any basket. This one is wide, flat-bottomed, and made from reeds that shimmer faintly with streaks of gold. You ask what it's for, and she doesn't even look up. Memory, she says. You wait for more. None comes. So you watch. Each strand she threads is deliberate. A long loop pulled taut here, a twist near the center. She hums, not a song you recognize, but it loops like the basket does. You start to see the pattern. She's not just making a thing to hold other things. She's telling something. Recording, in rhythm and repetition, the story of a flood season from 40 years ago. Jack leans over and whispers, "You can't read it with your eyes. Gotta touch it." He presses your hand to the edge. You feel it, bumps where the reeds thicken, tiny knots, twists. Each one marks something. A birth, a journey, a fire, a harvest. If you know the code, and the song, you can replay the past like a cassette tape made of grass. Historians still argue whether these baskets were intentionally mnemonic devices or just took on memory through use and association. But to the woman weaving it, there's no debate. "I know it happened," she says, "because I made it with my hands." Here's a delightful quirk. Some baskets contain errors on purpose, like a strand woven backwards or left slightly loose. These are reminders. Anchors for a specific moment of change, like a personal footnote. "That's when the possums came early," someone might say, pointing to a crooked twist in the weave. Or "That's when my brother left and didn't come back." Another woman brings over a much older basket, cracked and faded, the colors muted by decades of sun. She runs her fingers along it, eyes closing. "You feel that?" she asks. You nod. You don't feel the story, but you feel something. A pulse. A shape of memory without words. Weaving here isn't craft. It's archive. It's layered, encrypted, tangible memory. You wonder what we lose when we lock stories in paper or digital files, things we can't touch, things that don't smell like river mud or bend under a breeze. You watch the elder finish the last coil. She knots the end, sings one soft final note, and places the basket on the ground like it's settling into sleep. She looks at you then, not with a smile, not exactly. Just a recognition. A nod. Like she's seen that you saw. That you'll carry this too, now. You will. The basket still sits on the ground beside you as evening rolls back in, the sun dripping behind the trees like honey off a spoon. Shadows stretch, yawn, and curl around the trunks like they're settling in for the night. You glance back at the sky, habit, now, and pause. Something feels different. It's the stars. Not because they're gone, but because you can't see most of them. Only the boldest pricks of light poke through. The emu's outline is barely there. The sisters are smeared out like smudged ink. The Milky Way? Faded into background noise. The camp generator hums somewhere nearby. A small light flicks on near a tent. Someone checks their phone. All of it seems normal. Necessary, even. But the sky's gone quiet. You turn to Jack. He's staring upward, face unreadable. Hard to tell a story you can't see, he murmurs. And there it is. Light pollution. One of the most recent but most devastating disruptions to the ancient storytelling systems. For tens of thousands of years, Aboriginal people read the sky like a sacred text. But now, in many communities near cities or towns, the stars that once guided stories, farming, fire, and ceremony are simply gone. Washed out. Blurred. Forgotten. Historians and astronomers are scrambling now, working with elders to record the sky lore before it's lost. Star maps are being drawn. Digital recreations are being made. Apps are developed to help younger generations relearn what the land and sky used to say. But Jack doesn't need an app. He closes his eyes and begins to recite, slowly, gently, the shape of the sky he remembers. Where the emu once stood. Where the serpent curled. Where the 7 sisters used to race across the black. You don't need to see it, he says. You just need to keep talking about it. Still, there's a sadness in his voice. Not frustration. Not anger. Just that kind of quiet ache you feel when someone important stops calling. Here's a small, strange fact. In some regions, young people have begun painting starscapes back onto their walls, not just for decoration, but as a kind of protest. A memory wall. They'll take a story from their grandmother, map it out, and stick glow-in-the-dark dots across their ceilings, reconnecting with constellations the night sky has swallowed. They're rebuilding the sky from the inside out. You lie back again and squint. 1, 2, maybe 5 stars greet you now. It isn't enough to make the emu. Not tonight. But you remember where it should be. That has to count for something. Do you think the sky forgets us? You ask Jack. He doesn't answer right away. Just pokes at the fire. No, he says finally. But it waits. It's patient. You stop looking long enough, though, it might stop whispering back. And in that moment, you decide, you'll remember. You'll carry the patterns. Even if the lights blot them out, even if no one else sees, even if you have to redraw the stars on your ceiling one at a time. You won't let the sky go quiet. The fire crackles low, and you sit a little closer, drawn not just by the warmth, but by the hum in the air, a low, invisible vibration, like the land itself is clearing its throat. Someone nearby laughs. Not a forced chuckle, but a genuine, belly-deep laugh, the kind that lifts a whole group's energy for a second. It ripples out. Jack grins. Even the basket weaver smirks from her mat. The conversation has turned now, subtly, to outsiders. Not tourists. Not scientists. But the big kind, the ancient aliens, the space gods, the wild theories that swirl through YouTube rabbit holes and late-night documentaries. You heard the one about us being seeded by aliens? Someone jokes, mimicking a stiff robotic walk. Jack snorts, then raises one eyebrow. Those aliens ever explain dreaming stories to the frogs? Or why we knew the eclipses before telescopes? The group cackles. It's not mockery. Not completely. Because there's something funny, and a little sad, about how modern people often rush to explain indigenous wisdom as something that had to come from elsewhere. Couldn't possibly have been observation. Or memory. Or patience. Historians still debate whether this tendency comes from colonial arrogance or from a deeper disbelief that humans, any humans, could sustain complex knowledge systems without writing. But the result is the same. Respect gets wrapped in doubt. Here's a delightful irony. Many Aboriginal stories do include sky beings. Visitors. Travelers. Creatures of smoke and light that descend from the heavens. But they're not aliens. They're part of the dreaming, woven into the moral and ecological fabric of the land. They teach. They warn. They leave marks in stone. But they're not Martians. Jack pokes the fire with a stick and mutters, always someone trying to explain away what we already understand. You ask him if it bothers him. Not really, he says. Truth stays. Even when no one believes it. And there's the difference. The stories here aren't looking for proof. They're not desperate to be believed. They're tools. Lived-in wisdom. And like the stars, they don't need to shine all the time at work. You sit back and realize how strange it is, how strange we are, for needing to label everything, fact or myth, science or legend, real or imagined. Out here, those lines blur. Deliberately. Because the story of the 7 sisters can guide a seasonal migration and explain moral behavior. The emu in the sky can be a nesting calendar and a reminder not to overreach. And the serpent in the stars can be a literal water tracker and a spirit guide. You glance upward. The satellites are out again, bright, fake stars cruising confidently across the black. They don't blink. They don't flicker. They don't remember. But down here, someone does. And as the laughter dies down, replaced again by that gentle crackle, you feel it, the immense, quiet weight of a culture that never needed aliens to feel cosmic. Because the wonder was already here. The moon is high again, smug as ever, and the fire's embers glow like distant galaxies cradled in sand. Most of the group has drifted off to their swags or laid back in the grass, chests rising slow, eyes shut but ears still open, because the stories don't end when you sleep. They just shift tone. Only a few remain near the fire. You, Jack, and a girl no older than 8, curled beside her grandmother, chewing on a twig and whispering the start of a story you've heard before. But something about this moment feels heavier, slower, like time just widened. Jack stirs the coals with a stick and nods toward the girl. That's her first dreaming tonight, he says. She'll carry it now. You blink. Somehow you thought she'd been hearing stories all along. She has. But this is different. Tonight, the story wasn't just told at her, it was given to her. Entrusted. And when that happens, something ancient clicks into place. It's hard to describe, but you feel it. A kind of ripple, like someone just added a stone to a perfectly balanced tower, and instead of toppling, the whole thing steadied. Her tiny shoulders just picked up the weight of 100 generations. She doesn't even realize it yet. But she will. This is how it happens here. No ceremony with banners. No school exams. Just a fire, a story, and the slow, careful passing of memory from mouth to ear, hand to heart. Historians still argue how long oral traditions can last without corruption. A few suggest maybe 2 or 3 centuries, tops. But here you are, in the presence of a story that began before the Great Pyramid even had a blueprint. And it's not just surviving. It's growing. Here's a quiet, curious quirk. Some dreaming stories actually change depending on who receives them. Not dramatically, just shades of meaning. Because each person is different. Each community hears the echoes slightly differently. It's like a melody played on different instruments. Same song. New voice. Jack tells you about his own first dreaming. How he was 10. How he was terrified of getting it wrong. How his uncle said, "You can't ruin it. It's already in you. We're just waking it up." That line lodges in your chest. We're just waking it up. And now you look at the girl again, and she looks at you, and you realize she knows you've heard the story too. That she knows you're awake in it with her now. There's no pride in her gaze. Just recognition. As if to say, you're in this web now. Try not to wriggle too much. The fire crackles once more. Jack adds, that dreaming will carry her. Might even change her name. You nod, but don't speak. There's nothing to say. Just a quiet sense of being very, very small, and somehow more connected than you've ever felt. You lie back on your swag, arms folded under your head, and let the final flickers of starlight wash over you. And somewhere, in the dreaming, a new voice has just begun to hum. The night is thinner now. The sky has softened from velvet black to indigo, and a faint brush of light dusts the eastern horizon. It's not morning yet, not quite, but the stars have started pulling their blankets back on, yawning into the silence. Jack is already awake, sitting cross-legged, facing the coming sun, silent as stone. You sit beside him, not speaking either. There's nothing to say, only something to feel. Because after all the stories, the stars, the serpents, the seasons, you understand now. The land doesn't just hold the stories. It is the story. And the stars above? They're not just decorations or ancient wonders. They're the sentences written in slow-burning fire. The dreaming, this sprawling, endless story passed down in whispers, footsteps, and baskets, is not locked in the past. It's happening. Now. With every breath. You remember the girl's voice, soft and scratchy as dry grass, repeating her first dreaming into the dark. You remember the basket woman's fingers, weaving memory into thread. You remember the 7 sisters flickering above you, forever fleeing and forever found. You remember the tree that used to be a man, and the fire that came from the moon's ribs, and the stars that listened before they disappeared. Historians still debate whether the dreaming is past tense or present. They stumble over verb tenses, over translations, trying to figure out how a worldview can be so complete, so living, without locking itself into history. But you get it now. It's not past. It's not myth. It's not even culture, not the way you thought of that word before. It's now. It's place. It's you, if you're quiet enough to notice. Here's a final, quiet quirk. Some elders say the dreaming remembers you too. That once you've heard it, once you've carried a story across a single night of stars, you are woven into the weave. Not as a teller, perhaps, but as a thread. The horizon glows peach and silver. A single bird calls out, a currawong, maybe. You exhale. The fire dies gently behind you. You don't know if you'll remember all the names, or get every line of every story just right, but you'll remember how it felt. To listen. To see. To be watched by the stars, and not just seen, but recognized. And in that stillness, as the earth prepares to turn toward morning, something vast and ancient leans close and whispers, "You remember me. So I remember you." And now, as the sky brightens and the stories fold themselves into the quiet, you let your breath slow. You let the dust settle. The warmth of the fire still lingers on your clothes. The stars, though faded, are still there, just resting behind the blue, waiting for you to look up again. You feel grounded, held, like you've stepped into a current that's always been moving, and for a while, you got to float with it. The dreaming doesn't end, it only shifts into softer shapes when you sleep. Shapes that curl like smoke, like the path of a serpent, like a basket gently placed down and forgotten, but never empty. So now, just let your eyes close. Let your body melt into the quiet hum of this ancient land. Let the emu guard your dreams. Let the rainbow serpent wind gently through your thoughts. Let the stars, invisible now, tuck you in one by one. You're part of the story now. Good night. Sweet dreams.